Brothers and sisters, Muslims don't have to pay any stamp duty when they buy UK property, according to this one idiot. And because this one idiot has said it, and I think he's on the far right end of the spectrum from the little research I've done, others have picked it up. There's a Twitter handle called Turning Point UK, which is a conservative activist and political organisation who've also then claimed that if you follow Sharia law, you don't have to pay any stamp duty on UK property. So all of us who have paid stamp duty, we're clearly missing a trick. So I clearly want to watch this and figure out how to do it. So let's dive in and figure out if this is actually true or not.
Hello again. I thought that viewers might like to know about a method used by Muslims to evade the stamp duty that the rest of us have to pay when we're buying a house. As most people know, if you buy a house costing more than £250,000, you have to pay 5% of the value to the government as stamp duty land tax.
I mean, he's got the stamp duty land tax right, yeah, 250,000, fine, carry on.
This is a racket worked by the government to raise money which is impossible to evade for most of us. Unless you are a Muslim, that is.
I agree with the first part of that statement. It is a racket. It is a bit of a onerous tax. But I don't agree with the second bit. Muslims do have to pay this.
In which case you don't need to pay stamp duty, no matter how much the property costs. I realise this will sound quite unbelievable, so let me explain what is going on. Muslims are forbidden by their religion from financial dealings which involve paying interest on loans. As a matter of fact, so are Christians and Jews. The Bible is quite explicit about this, both in the Old and New Testament, and that's by the by.
I love the fact that he's turned the screw and the knife on the Christians and the Jews who he says should not be taking interest either, which he's right on, so fair play to him for that.
Muslims use various methods of financial dealing to avoid transactions which entail interest. I happen to be mixed up in such an arrangement myself since I send money to Gaza each month, and this is not done through a bank but rather a mechanism of hawala. But this too is, I think, going off at a tangent.
He's a complex individual. He's sending money to Gaza. I don't know why he's sending money to Gaza. I presume to help the Palestinians. I have no idea. But he's an entertaining fella, this guy.
In 2005, Tony Blair's government changed the law so that followers of Islam could buy property without paying stamp duty. Muslims are allowed to buy a house and then sell it onto an offshore financial company.
Muslims are allowed to buy the house and then sell it to an offshore financial company. No, that's not what happens. There's a bank that's involved, and that's definitely onshore UK bank. Usually it will be Al Rayyan or Gatehouse or other Islamic banks in the UK, so there's no offshore company going on.
They then lease the house from the company instead of taking out a mortgage, which would include interest payments. Stamp duty, which is applicable to all properties over a certain level, does not have to be paid on properties which are immediately sold on. This loophole, incidentally, costs the Treasury over £100 million a year.
So he's talking about this loophole costing the Treasury £100 million a year. I have no idea where he's getting those numbers from. If he's getting at this recent case that cost the Treasury, I think, a certain amount of money, I think the Treasury actually won it. And so all of these individuals involved are going to have to end up paying anyway. And this is not talking about residential mortgages. This is talking about really huge construction projects that were taking place that happen to be Sharia compliant. So it's nothing really to do with this topic entirely at all.
In the description to this video, I give a link to the relevant section of the British government website for the Land Registry. Incredibly, it has a large part devoted to an explanation of Muslim theology and how this affects the purchase of property. It begins like this. The theological basis for Islamic finance stems partly from the traditional prohibition of usury or interest, which means that interest-based selling may not appeal to followers of Islam. I need hardly say that no other religion has its own dedicated section on the Land Registry's website.
Yeah, the reason why no other religion has a dedicated section is because no other religion, to my best knowledge, has a specific financial code that they have to follow. And now this is the punchline, folks. If you actually look at the link he has shared, oh my God, 4.2 stamp duty land tax. The liability to pay stamp duty land tax or land transaction tax is structured to mirror a conventional mortgage finance purchase. So the appropriate tax will be payable on the first sale by the seller to the bank. If it exceeds the threshold, relief can be claimed on the second sale, subject to a few exceptions. So for those of you who don't know how Islamic mortgages work, the idea is that rather than a loan to buy the house, the bank actually buys a portion of the property, let's say 80% of it, and you buy 20% of it. And then at the end, after you slowly buy out the bank entirely, the bank fully transfers over the title to you. So the first time you buy it, let's say you buy it from Fred, you've bought it from Fred and the bank legally owns that property. So that's when the stamp duty is paid the first time. Now, in the end, the bank exits the property and it gives it to you, me, Ibrahim, for example. it would be unfair to charge double stamp duty in that situation. That's all this legislation is about. And the document itself, for heaven's sake, that he has shared is saying that. Madness.
Just to make it clear, I give another link to a different part of the government's website which deals with exemptions from stamp tax. It says plainly, and I quote, "You do not have to pay stamp duty, land tax or file a return if you use alternative property financial arrangements, for example, to comply with Sharia law."
Website that he quoted is also the HMRC website, the government website, but it's just a really high level summary that is flagging, by the way, there's a different treatment for sharia-compliant mortgages going on. That's all. But if you actually dig into it, and someone who's gone through multiple Islamic mortgage transactions, you definitely have to pay stamp duty, for heaven's sake.
So there it is. Muslims are able to dodge stamp duty, which the rest of us have to pay. And this is perfectly legal and specifically allowed in British law. And it is an absolute scandal.
I think if that was happening, it would be an absolute scandal. I think more broadly, I have deep sympathies for people who feel disenfranchised and left behind by the liberal, middle class, white elite that currently run this country, and I get that. And actually, ironically, I think there's a lot of overlap between our values and the values of this guy, right? He might be wrong on this particular issue, and he might be very racist, judging from some of his other videos as well. But I do have sympathy for people like this. But this is not the argument to make, and it's wrong.